Welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast, the go-to podcast for the pennstate.rivals.com website. I'm your host, Richard Schnyderite, joined by my co-host, as always, Dylan Callaghan-Croley. I always pronounce that wrong, I'm pretty sure, but we'll figure it out one day. Anyway, we got some not so breaking news, I guess, a little bit. So Micah Shrewsberry, we saw Providence head coach Ed Cooley go down to Georgetown, and everyone was rejoicing, saying Micah's staying. This is great for Penn State basketball. Then it's like, oh shit, Notre Dame's here. So tell us the latest between the rumors of Notre Dame and Micah Shrewsberry.
Yeah, so like you said, Georgetown job there was with Ed Cooley took down. We thought that everything would be cleared with Shrewsberry at that point. Obviously, that's not what happened because Georgetown, a couple hours later, we heard was in talks with Shrewsberry about potentially coming to South Bend and take over that job. Shrewsberry, obviously an Indiana native, has a lot of history in Indiana, born and raised there, had much of his coaching career there, coached at D2 Indiana, South Bend as well. But as of right now, I don't want to say anything for certain, but I'm feeling better about Penn State's chances to retain Shrewsberry here in the upcoming days. They're also talking to McDermott. I'm blanking on his first name. Greg McDermott over at Creighton about taking over that job as well. So we'll see what happens here, but I do feel a little bit better about Penn State's chances of retaining Shrewsberry here in the upcoming days, or I wouldn't be shocked if we find out in the next 24 hours either. I think Notre Dame wants to fill that job, or fill it quickly. But yeah, I think Shrewsbury's chances of staying in Happy Valley are a little bit higher than I felt last night. I know with our board, I said last night that I didn't feel great about Penn State's chances, but as time's gone on, I'm slowly come back around for Penn State and their overall chances here.
Yeah, no, I know I posted something late last night, I think around like 9:30. Obviously, first off, the David Jones of Penn Live posted that Notre Dame was courting Shrewsberry, and that kind of what started all this big rumor. Now, from what I was told is that there's a big package on the table, or Penn State is prepping a big package to keep Shrewsberry around. It's going to be an extension. It's going to be an NIL salary or NIL pool. You can't say salary because they don't pay the players for that. They pay them for ROI, of course. But it sounds like it's a pretty significant pool. I know it doesn't sound like much, but the rumor we heard was like $750K to like the $1 million range, which is pretty solid. It's nothing crazy, but it's
significant. It's certainly not top end, but it has a chance to be lucrative enough. Penn State. Yeah,
just to put it like this. Put it in perspective a little bit. I know one of the top All-American conference, I feel so weird saying that, the AAC guards is getting offers. He's in the portal currently. He's getting offers of $150,000 to $200,000 just to play for one more year. So that's kind of goes to show you that the $1 million a year would be pretty significant.
It would be.
Yeah, so I know we don't know what Notre Dame's packages is or what it could be for Shrewsberry, but it sounds like he's their top target right now. Now, like you mentioned, they also have Creighton's Craig McDermott, who's been a lifer at Creighton. Yep. But they're having some troubles in their athletic department. It sounds like they're going to get a new AD soon. And as we know, most of the time with the new AD, they're going to want to make a switch up. So that's one interesting tidbit there. I'm also hearing that Colgate's head coach, Matt Langle, is a serious candidate for Notre Dame as well. So the fact that Notre Dame's also courting others tells me that they're not really that confident in Shrewsberry is going to leave. And based on what we're hearing and based on what we're seeing, because they're recruiting a ton of portal guys right now still. Yeah. It doesn't seem like he's going to leave. And plus, I don't think anyone talks about it. His son just went to high school at State College and State College High. So it's like he probably made friends. You don't want to make a move again. And he's probably going to follow you wherever you go for the most part.
Absolutely.
But I think that's another big factor is family. Now that they're all out here at State College, it's kind of like, all right, do you want to pick up and move again back to Indiana or build something here at Penn State?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other thing to really think about here is Penn State is in a very tough spot when it comes to if Shrewsberry leaves, you have a chance to set back the program per se almost. And I covered this in my opinion piece over the weekend about Shrewsberry, and Penn State needs to be serious about going forward, or serious going forward about the basketball program. They need to invest in this program, which includes Shrewsberry. You have to offer him a very competitive salary that not just keeps him in Happy Valley beyond this coaching carousel, but future coaching carousels as well. Sure, if they still have success in the next 2-3 years, there's going to be blue buds that come calling, and it's going to be tough to retain him at that point. But you have to keep him around long enough so he can continue building this culture and program up. So when he does leave, you are in a advantageous spot of being a promising program that has a ton of upside going forward, that you can attract one of the better big name mid-major head coaches to the opening in the future. I think Penn State's in a decent spot where they would be able to get a nice name if Shrewsberry would leave, but it's certainly not to the point where you want it to be yet if Shrewsberry would leave, if that makes sense.
Of course.
But there's still plenty of building to do here. This year was a great step for the program, but it needs to become continuous. It doesn't matter if it's just a one-year tournament visit. They had that over a decade ago, and it took 2011 to 2023 to get back to the tournament. They can't wait that long again to get back if they want to stay relevant in college basketball. They were one of the big talking points of the tournament this year, and there's no reason they can't be that going forward. This is a university that is one of the best in the Northeast, one of the best in the Big Ten. They have great athletic programs across the board. There's no reason men's basketball cannot be a top half of the Big Ten program long term. Mm-hmm. And I think keeping Shrewsberry around is big in that. And they need to, get more NIL dedicated to it as well, assistant salary pool, et cetera. And if you lose Shrewsberry, I just think it would be very tough because you're liable to lose at least one or two of your commitments, recruits from 2023 and 2024. You lose a little bit of that transfer portal lore that they've built over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. It would just almost be a program reset at the worst time possible.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's crazy to see, not just on the court, but off the court recruiting wise. Shrewsberry's been a hell of a recruiter. This entire staff has. I mean, we've seen Keba obviously start significant amount of games this year as a true freshman. Mahaffey, I can't spell it. I can't pronounce shit. He's had a big contributions here this season. Kanye Clary's played a lot. The highest rated recruit in the class, and Jameel Brown hasn't played much at all, and he's still got a ton of potential. Demetrius Lilly. And then 2023, you have Braden Shrewsberry, who I know is his son, is very good. And then you have Kerry Booth, who's a top 100 player. The potential there for not just this season, like you said, but next season and the season after that. Add in a couple portal guys, and who knows where we'll at.
And no disrespect to Braden, but I mean, Booth is the one you need to keep around no matter what. And I think they have, obviously a little better luck if Shrewsberry would leave with Booth since he has a Penn State legacy. But a lot of that I think would be contingent on getting that next hiring right. Now, as we've said in this podcast already, we feel good about Penn State's chances right now for them to retain Shrewsberry. But that's great points by you. And the other thing is next year's already projecting to be a little bit of a step back because they're losing a ton of talent. And unless they hit multiple home runs in the transfer portal, it's just probably going to be too much of an ask to get back to the NCAA tournament next year. But there's no reason this team can't be competitive next year with the talent they're bringing in, with the transfer portal. Yes, you may not hit home runs like you did this year or the last 2 years, but if you can at least field a competitive team, you have a chance to make some noise in the Big Ten. And with the culture that Shrewsberry has instilled in this program, you can't count them out of not making a tournament run. It just surely will be less likely looking at the roster and knowing what they're going to lose.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. Just looking at next year's roster right away. Do they add some young pieces? Yes, they have a nice little young core. I know despite everyone saying, hey, like they're one of the oldest teams in college basketball, they still have a lot of young pieces that contributed this season and that will contribute next season. And yeah, Penn State's already pretty active in the transfer portal. We have a list of 15 guys already they've reached out to, and they already hosted one in Josh Cohen out of St. Francis. What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, Cohen is a nice little big man out of St. Francis in Pennsylvania, part of the NEC conference. One thing Penn State really missed this year was kind of that big man presence down low. I know they have a couple taller guys on the roster, but they didn't really have a impact guy down there. Now, I'm not saying Cohen is the type of player who could be an impact player for the Nittany Lions. Obviously, going from the NEC to the Big Ten would be quite the jump. But I think he's somebody who can come in and give Penn State potentially some quality minutes every game and give you maybe – he averaged 21, 8, and 2.5 this year for the Red Flash. Obviously not going to have that type of impact, but I think if he can even come in and give you 6 to 8 points with 3 or 4 rebounds a game, that would be a really nice addition to the roster just to have for some height, depth, etc. It's the one thing, like I said, they really missed this year that they could have used in the tournament and even throughout the year was that big guy in the paint that you could drop the ball down low and trust to make the baskets. He's a good shooter for his career, shooting over 58%, shoots almost all within inside the paint or very close to the basket. Doesn't take much mid-range nor long range. I think he has 2 3-point attempts in his career, which obviously at 6'10" isn't a surprise. But in today's game, obviously, the 3-pointer, and there's forwards out there who could very much do that. That's not his game, however. But also, you look at Penn State's roster, they're losing Michael Henn, who is out of eligibility at the forward position. And then you also look, there's Miles Dredd, who at 6'4" was considered a guard/forward. He's out of eligibility. And Seth Lundy, another guard/forward on the roster, could potentially leave this offseason, but does have another year remaining. I think that will be interesting to watch. Will he decide to go pro, whether that's the NBA, the G League, or overseas? Or if Shrewsberry would transfer, would Lundy look potentially to join Shrewsberry? Sorry, if Shrewsberry would leave for Notre Dame or another program, would Lundy look to transfer to that program? That remains to be seen. But I think Cohen could have a nice little fit in Penn State's roster and game-to-game plans next year if he were to transfer there. I think there's going to be some nice competition, though, for Cohen. Not many 6'10" forwards out there who can average the numbers he did for St. Francis. I know it's the NEC, but still pretty impressive points he put up this year, numbers I should say.
Yeah, hey, we can't hate on the NEC too much. Fairleigh Dickinson did take down Purdue, and they did beat Fairleigh Dickinson once last year.
Yeah,
behind Cohen's 31 points. And then on top of that, we didn't even talk about the fact that he had 2 40-point games. And then he also played a Big Ten school this year, and they played against Ohio State, and he dropped 18 and 10. So, it's not like he can't compete. He's got the skills to compete. It's just a matter of he's not going to put up – I don't see him putting up 22 and 8 in the Big Ten. But
no, and it's kind of he's not going to be the biggest guy, most physical guy on the court most of the time in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a big change in style of play if he were to come to Penn State. Obviously, all talking hypothetical here at this point, but he would be able to have a quality impact, I think, on the team. He also, of course, wouldn't have the usage rate that he had at St. Francis. In St. Francis here, he had a usage rate of 30%. That isn't going to happen at Penn State. Maybe 10% at best. But again, somebody I think if you can take him, you absolutely do, just to get that size down low, and I think it would really benefit them going to the next year.
Yeah, and I think this kind of leads back to what I was saying before, that this staff is here. They're trying so hard to rebuild this roster again after losing a couple of guys to graduation. And the fact that they're already hosting guys within a day of or 2 days of playing their last NCAA tournament game tells me that they're probably going to stay. They're going to work something out. But Cohen's just on one of the names. Like I said before, we have like 15 names already confirmed. A lot of them are guard heavy, and that shouldn't come as too much of a surprise because obviously Cameron Winter's gone, Jalen Pickett's gone, and you got to get scoring somewhere. I mean, Seth Lundy could come back, like you said, but like you need a scorer, right?
Yeah, absolutely you do. So the points have to come from somewhere, and while I do like some of the guys going into the that will be on the roster going into next year, there's nobody that really stands out to me right now that is going to take over that role for Penn State. Now, obviously, somebody could make that jump, but I think they definitely need to go out and find some sort of scorer, especially somebody who can shoot strongly from the outside if they want to be competitive again next year.
Yeah, no, for sure. But that's it's enough about hoops. I guess we got pretty much everything covered in that regard. Let's talk a little.
We should mention that 4-star shooting guard, number 73 player in the Rivals 150 for basketball, did name Penn State to his top 6 yesterday alongside Marquette, Oklahoma, Stanford, Villanova, and Virginia Tech. I think that's, if you're Penn State, it's going to be interesting to see if they do have a chance to land him here beyond landing top 6. But to land in the top 6 with some of those schools, primarily Marquette and Villanova, is also a really good sign for Penn State going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sir Muhammad's an interesting one, and he did just visit campus at the end of January, as well as an official visit in November. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think Penn State's right there in the thick of it, and the name might sound familiar to some, as he's the son of Nazir Muhammad, who's a longtime NBA vet, obviously since retired, but it does sound like Penn State's not even. I know it's a top 6, but it sounds like Penn State might be in the top 3, according to a couple people.
I think they do have a serious chance here. But they'll have to go up against some teams that can throw haymakers.
Yeah, of course. NC State's one, Stanford, Virginia Tech. They're all good.
And this is where NIL becomes also big, because even those schools like Villanova and Marquette, those private schools can have some serious NIL money to throw around in today's college basketball.
Yeah, like we just said before about Georgetown, that was a big reason why their job is so popular as it is. But all right, now we'll go to the good stuff. We'll go to football. Spring ball started last week. We'll have more today on practice again. But let's go through the positions. We'll go through a couple of the main ones. Let's start with quarterback. Obviously, we talked about it last pod. It was interesting that Franklin was kind of like, hey, it's an open competition, but it's like, okay, come on, dude. We know it's all Drew Allar. But what are your thoughts over on this quarterback position? It's not the deepest. They're young. They're a little bit green. But can they have success?
That's a good question. I think they can. I think they very much can. Obviously, Drew is the guy that we're all projecting to be quarterback number 1 going into West Virginia in the fall. And barring injury or, any more scooters that we see out there on campuses, I think he is going to be QB1. I think what he showed last year is pretty promising. Obviously, you want to clean up some of the inaccuracy issues, but we knew that was his weakness per se coming into his career at Penn State. That was the knock on him coming out of high school, even though there wasn't much to knock him about. It was just that his accuracy could be a little off at times. But I think the upside with Drew is obviously through the roof. I mean, if he steps in as the quarterback that we think he is, we're talking about a Heisman Trophy contender. And you look at the Heisman odds right now. I'm not sure what he is exactly right now, but I think he was top 15 earlier this offseason in terms of odds. And this is a kid who has 50-some passing attempts in his career, maybe even less. So everybody knows what the upside here is, the potential is. It's about, can he hit that potential? If he doesn't hit that potential, Penn State could be in some trouble next year. Moving on from Drew, you got Bo Pabula as the projected backup starting quarterback again, barring injury. I actually think coming into Penn State, when they both came into the program last year, I thought Bo had a little bit of a higher floor than Drew. Obviously, Drew has a higher ceiling. I still think Bo's floor is pretty high. I think he could be an average to above average Power 5 starting quarterback at Penn State. But I also think it's such a different skill set that it's hard to see how it's hard to project what type of impact he would have or how the offense would be catered to him right now. just because the last 4 years we've seen the Sean Clifford offense, which has slowly developed more into a not pro style offense. It's still, whatever Yurcich likes to call his offense. But he went from a scrambler, dual threat guy to more of a pocket passer. Drew is obviously a pocket passer. Bo, on the other hand, is a much more Trace McSorley-like type build of a quarterback, a guy who can run, take a little bit of a beat-in, but also he can stand back in the pocket and deliver some dimes as well. And like I said, I like his potential as well. But he obviously didn't play at all last year, which is a little bit of a concern heading to this season, which why on our last episode I said don't take Franklin's comments about the quarterback competition this spring too deeply, because they need to see what they have in Bo. They need to know he's ready to go. If Drew would go down week 1, week 2, week 3, that Bo can step in once Big Ten play comes around and be a productive, quality quarterback that can allow Penn State to be competitive. Sure, if Drew's not there, your chances of going 10-2, 11-1, 12-0 dwindle majorly. But if Bo can come in and be above average, you still have a chance to be 8-4, maybe 9-3, and still be competitive against the Ohio States and the Michigans of the world. But there's no sugarcoating it. It's the Drew show. It's Drew LR show, and if he's what we all think he is, Penn State can compete for a Big Ten title in the college football playoffs this year. If he's not, it kind of goes back to step one for Penn State and finding who that quarterback is going to be that can take them to the promised land. Because in today's college football, outside of your Georgia, who has 5 stars at every position, Alabama, you can throw that into the mix. You need an elite level quarterback to win in today's college football.
Yeah, no.
How many schools are going out there winning with Stetson Bennett?
For sure. Just to put it in perspective, Drew Aller is tied for 7th in Heisman odds according to FanDuel right now. That's ahead of names like Quinn Ewers, JJ McCarthy, Blake Corum, several other starters around the country. So that just shows how much potential this guy has and how much potential people think he could be. He could be something special, but it's just,
I mean, we're talking if he pans out, potential number 1 overall pick in a few years, just based off his measurables and his physical skill set. That arm is, you watched him on the field last year during warmups, and just the way he easily flicked the ball with his wrist was. I don't want to say mind blown, but you look at how even Sean was throwing, and it's 2 different worlds of quarterbacks. The physical skill set there for Drew is amongst the best in the entirety of college football.
Yeah. So now let's move on to the next position. It's a little more solidified already, I would assume. Running back. Now, we know it's Katron Allen and the Nick Singleton show. That's beyond well known. They might be the best duo in college football, in my opinion.
I think you make the argument for sure.
Yeah. So now after them, who's the third back? Because we've always seen a third back come in and get a couple carries per game, whether it was Ford last year or someone else, or maybe even Tank. Like, is Tank gonna get third back carries? Because Montgomery's coming off an ACL injury as a freshman. He probably won't play much. Wallace is still kind of new, like a little green to the position, as he played kind of like a slot receiver / running back for his high school team. So do we know if there's a third back, or are we just going to ride with these 2 and just see what happens?
Yeah, I think the spring idea is obviously you're going to give Singleton and Allen most of the carries here, as you should. But you're also going to watch their workload. So I think the walk-on group that they have here is going to get quite a bit of carries this spring. I wouldn't be shocked if they even out-carry Allen and Singleton towards in some of the practices, just to give the 2 bell cows a little bit of a break. But heading into next season, that's the big question. Obviously, you're not going to give walk-ons meaningful carries unless they really show in spring and fall camp that they're ready for that. So Montgomery, we'll see where he is in his rehab. We should have a good idea about that once fall camp comes around. Cameron Wallace, I can see getting almost carries by necessity. Penn State's not one to really redshirt your running backs. They like to get those guys out there on the field often, especially somebody with Wallace's skill set. I think you find a way to get in the ball creatively that will allow him, even though he's still going to be adjusting to the college game, is still, like you said, a little raw. He'll be able to still be productive. And I think it's just about creativity for him. And we'll see, like I said, with Montgomery's knee, if he's able to be fully healthy come the season, I think we see him as well. But at the end of the day, we're talking about maybe at most 10 carries over the course of the game for anybody not named Nick Singleton or Katron Allen. Yeah, in those games against the easier opponents, sure, there'll be more carries to go around. But when we talk about the heart of the Big Ten schedule, it's going to be Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, or Singleton and Allen, however you want to say it, getting 95% of the carries.
Yeah, no, of course. Now, the most interesting group on the roster, in my opinion, is this wide receiver group. I don't even know where to begin. They're losing Parker Washington, who was their leading receiver. They're losing wide receiver 2 and Mitchell Tinsley, who only came in for a year. Who do you see kind of stepping up? I know they obviously added 2 transfers in Malik McClain and Dante Cephas. But do you see those guys at the top 2? Lambert Smith had an explosive Rose Bowl game. Like, what's going on with this group right now?
Yeah, I think I see Cephas as wide receiver 1 heading into the fall. I think he's the type of wide receiver that can come in and have – it's always hard because G5 wide receivers light it up, but it's very hard for G5 receivers that light it up at the G5 level. It's very hard for them to come into Power 5 football and have the same impact. There are some out there. It remains to be seen if Cephas is that type of talent. But I think at the worst, we're still looking at a Mitchell Tinsley type player here for Penn State next fall, which I don't have Tinsley's numbers right in front of me, but he had a pretty productive season for the Nittany Lions after transferring him from Western Kentucky. I'm looking at it now, 51 receptions, 577 yards, 5 touchdowns. I think you'll take that out of Cephas. I think the chances of him going more towards 70 for 750, 5, 6, 7 touchdowns is very much possible. So I see Cephas as number 1. McClain is the guy that I think has the highest ceiling out of anybody in this wide receiver room. He's your prototypical dream wide receiver. 6'4", 200-some pounds. I forget his 40 out of the top of my head, but I believe it's around the 4.5 mark. He just has a great combination of size, speed, physicality that's hard to find out there. If he can put it all together, Penn State has a potential, I think, star on their hands at wide receiver. That being said, he has to put it together. I think at worst, we're looking at a guy who can be a really good number 3 wide receiver for Penn State. But at his high end, I think we're looking at a potential number 1 guy who can go out there and give you a maybe not Jahan Dotson levels of production, but if he was pushing 800, 900 yards, maybe not this season, but next season, 2024, I wouldn't be shocked. I think he needs a little bit more seasoning. He didn't get to see the field a ton at Florida State, but that wasn't any fault of his own. That Seminoles wide receivers room is pretty stacked. The Seminoles have been doing a great job at recruiting wide receivers, so that's really not his fault. But he'll have a chance to come into Penn State and prove right away that he's a wide receiver who can be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. And I expect him to give him that opportunity next fall as well. Then you can't forget about Keandre Lambert-Smith. Had a really nice end of the season against Michigan State and Utah in the Rose Bowl. I think he had about over 200 yards, 2 touchdowns in those 2 games combined. He really came on at the end of the season. Throughout the beginning part of the season, as we got towards the end, it wasn't the best of seasons for him. One of those guys that we're always wondering, when is the breakout year going to come? It is yet to come, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's this fall either. He's probably going to go into the slot position where I think his speed is going to be much more valued and I don't want to say valued. It's going to be to much better use. I think you're going to be able to create a lot of great mismatches there in the middle of the field with linebackers. So I wouldn't be shocked if that breakout season is coming for him as well. Overall, I think you look at these top 3, there's no certainty that they're going to come in and light it up for Penn State. But I think the ceiling is really high, and I think a lot of that goes back to Drew as well. Drew's the type of quarterback that can make your wide receivers better, throw your wide receivers open. I mean, that's the true trait of a great wide receiver, a great quarterback, right? Can you throw your wide receivers open? Can you put the ball in a window that only they can get to? I think Drew has that type of talent. I think the wide receivers have the type of talent that can take advantage of those throws as well. So yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of question marks. Not many proven commodities at the Power 5 level. Lambert Smith may be the biggest proven commodity of the wide receiver room at the Power 5 level, because obviously Cephas is coming to G5, and McClain didn't see much playing time at Florida State. But I think the potential is really high to be maybe the second best wide receiver room in the Big Ten. And then you look beyond those three. I think Liam Clifford could come into his own little role this season as a nice slot receiver. Amari Evans, I love his potential thanks to his sub 4.5, maybe even 4.4 speed.
Yeah, it's quick.
And he's quite a big wide receiver as well. He's 6'1", I think 180-ish pounds. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, at that size, he's no small guy either. I think he's a lot of guys at his speed you would think maybe go into a slot role, but I think he could actually play an X, kind of like Dante Cephas can as well, where his speed can be used on the outside. So I like his potential this year. And beyond that, I think it's going to be interesting to see how things play out. Caden Saunders is a guy that obviously didn't have the impact with Dawood as a true freshman, but still I think is somebody who can have a nice impact this upcoming season. And then Harrison Wallace III developed a nice little role in 2022 as the season went on. And I think he's going to continue to develop that role. I never think he's going to be a number one guy or number two guy, but I think he's a nice rotational wide receiver who can start occasionally and still give you solid production over the course of a game or a full season.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on just about everyone. I know everyone wants to know about Christian Driver obviously moving over, but it's still new. Like, I know who his dad is. I know his dad's a great, but like, you got to give him time, I think.
Yeah, and it's going to take time. I'm not expecting a week one impact from Christian Driver, but I don't see a reason he maybe can't be on the field by mid-season, getting some somewhat consistent reps at wide receiver. He's going to have this spring to work on it. He's going to have this fall to work on it. If it comes naturally to him, which it wouldn't be shocking, I think we could see him at some point as the season goes on. But the Penn State fans should be patient with him. And I think the end product could be quite beneficial, but it's still a major question mark.
Yeah. So, all right, we talked about a lot today. We'll leave the other positions for another podcast, but we'll hear from James Franklin later today, and then Pro Day on Friday. So that should be pretty exciting.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Now, there are some guys who performed, I guess I don't want to say subpar, but didn't meet what I expected them to do at the NFL Combine. So I'm interested to see if they can have a little bit of a better performance during the Pro Day, especially testing-wise. A guy like Jair Brown, who did test great. I still think if he once he gets to the NFL level, he's going to be a very good safety. He's going to be maybe not a starter, but he's going to be solid overall. I think he could up his stock at the Pro Day. I think a guy like Mustapher could up his stock definitely. And then a guy like Parker Washington as well, somebody I'll be keeping a close eye on. Yeah,
of course. So it's going to be an interesting one. I will have boots on the ground, I believe, right? You'll be there?
Yeah, both myself and Josh will be there on Friday.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see who's hearing from who, what teams, and all that good stuff. Like you said, hopefully they can boost some of their stock a little bit. I know Joey Porter just got projected number 14 today in Mel Kiper's mock draft. He's a weirdo because his mock draft it's beyond bizarre. There's just some weird ones, but anything else before we sign off?
I'm just checking through my notes here, but I don't think that there's anything else major that we have to discuss today.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, we'll keep you stay tuned on the message boards, the Lions Den, for the latest on the Micah Shrewsberry saga, I guess we'll call it at this point. We'll see if Notre Dame poaches them or he stays at Penn State. Sounds like we're hearing he stays in State College, but shout out to Penn State wrestling. Obviously, not the way they wanted to win their 11th title, but it's still a team title at the end of the day. Still got a couple golds.
Yeah, we could obviously quickly touch on that. Just
yeah.
There's not much to say outside this is one of the best dynasties we've seen in college sports history. 10 team titles now in 12 years. Obviously, some guys didn't have the success they hoped in the finals, but overall, there's not a better program out there in college wrestling today, and there's no signs it's going to slow down either. I know Roman didn't win it in the end, but just what a fantastic career for him as well.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what most of these guys do next. I know some of them, who was it? Carter said he wanted to go to the Olympics and go to UFC. I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Roman in the UFC.
Especially now that there's been a little bit of a path set for Penn State wrestlers to get there.
Yeah, with Bo Nickel doing pretty well so far. I think he fights again soon, I'm pretty sure, actually. Didn't he just weigh in another day?
Yeah, he just agreed to a fight with let me see if I can find it quickly. But I did see the report that he just agreed to another fight, I think, this summer.
Yeah, I believe it's coming up pretty soon because I think he literally just weighed in another day, did he not?
I just pulled up here. It looks like potential. That's Tracy and Gore recently offered to face him.
Challenged him. Gotcha. So we'll see what happens there. I know obviously he looked pretty good in UFC 282 when he defeated Pickett, I believe it was.
Yeah, pretty fast.
I have trouble remembering the smaller guys. I've been watching all these these big names.
Is not my particular forte, but Bo definitely has been watching more of it now that he's built a nice career for himself.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fun one, and he's buying into all the hype, and he's the perfect media guy. He loves the camera in front of him.
He does, and it's just another big, recruiting win for Penn State. It's not that the wrestling program needs any, more to throw out of the recruiting trail, but it certainly helps having Bo in the national spotlight like that.
Yeah, of course. So Bo's 4-0 right now, if you include his Contender Series record, which I believe they do. So we'll see what happens. Maybe probably 5-0 if I had to guess, and we'll see where he goes from there. But I guess that's really all we got for this one. So, guys, Thanks again for listening. There's another great Penn State 365 podcast. If you don't already subscribe to the website, pennstate.rivals.com, all your recruiting content, team news, wrestling news, et cetera, anything Penn State related, we have it covered. And also give us a 5-star review on any of your podcasting apps that you're listening on right now, and hit the subscribe button down below on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods, all that good stuff. But for me and Dylan, it's another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast, and signing off.